Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Matera, Executive Director of the Basalt Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us today. And more importantly, thank you to Stephen Collier for joining us to give us a rundown of the Restaurant Revitalization Fund and what that means. It's a program out of the SBA, and he will give us all the details about this program. There's a lot of nuances to it. A lot of great information is available on the SBA's website, which I will try to shoot links if they come up in conversation. And this session is being recorded for later viewing so that people can have this information on demand. So we do ask that you remain on mute and cameras off until we get to the Q&A portion of things. So without further ado, Stephen, I am going to promote you as host and let you take it from there.
Does that come with like extra pay or anything, or?
I wish. It gives you full control of the Zoom call.
Outstanding. All right. Well, with great power comes great responsibility. So let me go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and share this kind of PowerPoint we've got up here. And here we are. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so fun little PowerPoint slides. That's been our life with Zoom. So a little introduction. So my name is Steve Collier. I'm an economic development specialist with the SBA Colorado office, based in Denver, but we have two economic development specialists in the state. My counterpart, we kind of cut the state off at Monument Hill between El Paso and Douglas County. So I take going all the way out west and then going up north to the border to Wyoming, and then out east to Kansas and Nebraska. And it's kind of my territory. And the goal is, we try to build these relationships with different chambers, economic development organizations, things like that, so that we can get information out to you all, the businesses, in any which way we can. So just a little overview there. So there are a lot of slides to the overall Restaurant Revitalization Fund PowerPoint you're looking at. I have abridged this down just to the stuff that is the general overview. So if there are particular questions, if we can save those to the end, or go ahead and document them in the chat, we'll capture those. Sometimes there may be some very specific questions that I might not be able to answer right away, but I have an entire staff here in Denver, as well as our entire Restaurant Revitalization Fund, call it like our cell, so nationwide team, that can work those questions for folks. So let's go ahead and get started. So what are we talking about? So for those that are not familiar yet, the American Rescue Plan Act that was passed on March 11th created the RRF Fund, a little bit more than $28 billion in this overall pot of money. And I'll go into a second about how some of those funds are set asides for some of our socially or economically disadvantaged businesses. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then the funds must be used for eligible uses, and we'll talk about what those eligible uses are here in a moment, no later than March 11th of 2023. So it's very nice to have a very large window in front of us for businesses to take advantage of. So these funding set-asides, excuse me. So you can see there, I don't really need to read from slides. I'm sure you all can as well. But the overall point here is that for particular categories that your business might fall in, if you are eligible for Restaurant Revitalization Fund, there are specific funds set aside for individual circumstances for businesses that fall into these categories. And a copy of these slides will be provided to Chris. So, okay, so who's eligible? Simply put, if you have a business that serves food or serves beverages, you more than likely are eligible for Restaurant Revitalization Fund. These are just some examples up on the screen of businesses that touch into that. But some interesting examples, like there at the bottom, you see inns. So if you have, let's just say maybe as an example, you have a bed and breakfast, and 30% or excuse me, 33% or more of your gross revenues generated from food sales or beverage sales, then you're going to be eligible for Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So it's kind of interesting how they have broad-based defined who's eligible to this. In most SBA programs, we either rely on DUNS numbers or NICS codes to see if you fall within the category. it just makes it that much easier for the government based on that types of data. But with this one, the way that the law has been written by the Congress, it's much more open-ended. So that's what's kind of really nice about it. Now, who do we know exactly who's not eligible for this? So if you are a Fortune 500 company, for instance, and you own McDonald's, you own tons, or you have tons of franchises, you're not going to be eligible for this program. However, for instance, in Colorado Springs, there is a chain of Mexican restaurants called La Casita, kind of a fast casual Mexican food kind of joint. They only have about 4 or 5 locations. They're independently owned, family owned. That would be an example of like a franchise setup that is going to be eligible for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. However, if you have a business that it does serve food or serve beverages, but you've permanently closed, and we'll get into some specificities on that here in the presentation, you are not going to be eligible. If you're a nonprofit, you're not going to be eligible. So just some of those areas that, if you cross into the Shutter Venue Operators Grant, well, we can't double dip into the 2 different grant programs. So, all right. So, okay, you apply. Well, what can I even get? There's kind of a big gap here between a minimum award of $1,000 and up to $5 million per location. So, the entire idea here is they've got a giant pot of money, and they're trying to make it as easy as possible for businesses to apply for it, to be eligible for it. And based on your, and we'll get into this, your 2019 gross receipts, or if you were a business that started up in 2020, we'll get into that specific issue here in a second. Hey, you could be eligible for a good amount based on those losses. Okay, so who is eligible? What type of entity can apply? Well, you can see it's pretty broad-based. So you have your traditional sole props, your LLCs, even if you file as an S corp, independent contractors, self-employed partnerships. They've made it pretty easy to be an entity set up to get access to the funds. Short answer there. So specifically, if any of your businesses do fall under the category of a franchise, there is just a couple of additional hurdles. We are the government, so we do require extra work for you to do. And we have to make fun of ourselves from time to time. But we have a program where it's a franchise disclosure. So we have to have businesses self-identify as a franchise, and we have to put them and list them in our directory of franchises. So again, a couple extra steps, but just going through that process helps to get your RRF request going. Again, this information will be in the slides. So if this is applicable to you, you'll be able to follow up on that particular slide for that process. Okay, so this is an issue that businesses in Colorado have run into. 2020 hits, COVID hits, and it's just a giant sucker punch to your business plan. And in some cases, probably many of you have seen information that's floated around on social media of the big list of what have been really mainstays in historical restaurants in Denver that have closed their doors permanently. So these would be examples of full up bankruptcies and closures. Well, in some cases they're bankruptcies, but in some cases just closures where they would not be eligible for the funds. However, if you have temporarily closed, and that's this last item here at the bottom, if you are temporarily closed due to whether it be COVID restrictions or whether it would be how COVID has affected your business and you're waiting for it to blow over, you're still going to probably be eligible for RRF. So, but if you are in a situation where you have liquidated, you won't be eligible. But if you have gone through a bankruptcy restructuring, as the slide indicates, you are going to be eligible. Okay, so there is a component with RRF that touches the Paycheck Protection Program. I know a lot of businesses have taken advantage of PPP, and so that there is a component there that that does apply to it. So there is a formula established that if you've gotten X amount of PPP funds Let's say that you received a $100,000 PPP loan. You're eligible for $150,000 through RRF. $100,000 is going to be subtracted from your overall RRF request, and you would only be eligible for $50,000 at that point. That's essentially what the formula is going to be looking like. There are going to be exceptions here and there, as you can see that there's some differences between first draw and second draw PP loans. There are some nuances, but generally speaking, for most businesses, that's how that's the structure they're going to fall into if they've received PPP and if they're eligible for RRF. Okay, so you're an eligible business, you apply, you get funds. What can I even use those funds for? So unlike PPP, for those that are familiar, PPP had very, very stringent uses. So obviously at least 60% of PPP had to go to payroll costs. That is assuming that you wanted to get PPP forgiven. You're either to your rent or to your mortgage for your commercial business, utilities, and a couple of little things. Here, RRF, much more broad-based use. I mean, you could even buy your food, like it says right there, for your food and beverage expenses, raw materials. You can use your RRF to start building up your stock for going into the subsequent seasons. There is one question, and I'm going to get into this in a second, that I'm trying to get confirmation from SBA on, but in the construction expenses, it says expansion costs are not eligible. And so I'm trying to get further clarification on, does expansion mean, hey, there is a building, maybe I'm in kind of a main street strip mall and the building next to me is vacant and I want to buy that building to expand my restaurant or expand my location. Is that considered an expansion, or is expansion being able to buy out a competitor? So we know that it's probably not going to be by the competitor, but I'm trying to get the exact definition of expansion, because I've already been asked that question from a business in Castle Rock, and I'm trying to get clarification on that. So I'm not sure if that piques anyone's interest there. But you can see the different areas that RRF can be used for. The short answer is there's a lot of eligible uses that you can use those funds for. Okay. So again, right here, expenses that are incurred between February of 2020, so right before COVID, all the way through March 2023. That is a very long time frame. So that is a wonderful use of those funds if you're eligible for them, because it can really cover and help businesses recover over the course of a very much longer time horizon. And the short answer is that one bottom point, I just want to foot stomp that. If you are eligible for funds and are dispersed funds, you got to use them before March 11th of 2023, or you'll be on the hook to return any leftover RRF funds back to the U.S. government. So what does that mean? That also means documentation. So there is no specificity yet. I am assuming that there will be updated information that comes out from SBA over the coming weeks and months. That goes through the Federal Register of basically indicating to businesses you need to be documenting what your RRF funds are going to, because eventually, the government, whether, I don't want to use the word audit, but the government's going to want to do a review of, okay, you got these funds, did you buy a Ferrari with them, or did you use them for the eligible expenses? As many of you have probably seen in the news, we've seen some instances of how the Paycheck Protection Program has been misused and fraud. And so obviously the powers that be want to make sure that that is not going to happen. So I'm assuming that will come down the pipe. And again, just kind of reiterating that point again. Okay, let me skip right here. Okay, so how do you apply? Very easy. Restaurants.sba.gov. Very simple. There is a customer service line. And again, all this information will be available in the slides that I'll provide to Chris. They try to make this as painless as possible. There are going to be multiple forms that you'll have to gather. I've got that information here in the slides as well, and you can reference that. But because everyone's situation obviously is going to be uniquely different than others, it's hard to go into onesie, twosie different scenarios at this point. I'm sure folks probably understand that. Okay, so where are we in this timeline? We had 3 categories of an application phase. We are done with the pilot program. So that was kind of the experimental area, make sure that for the few businesses that were part of the pilot program, they're the ones that helped us work out any kinks that popped up. There were a couple, but we think we figured that out now. We are now in the priority period, and I'm going to be going into this in a little more in depth here in a second. But we're now in that area where if you are a woman-owned business, if you're a veteran-owned business, or you're in this category of what we consider to be economically or socially disadvantaged, the RRF is now open for you. The portal is open. And then once we get on to day 22, I'll have to relook at the calendar to know exactly that day is, because the portal fully opened up on Monday. So 22 days out from Monday. Then it's going to be open up for everyone else. Okay, so what are those priority groups? And this is very important. You are one of those categories, has to be 51% at least owned by you or whoever your senior partner is. And the management and the daily business operations of that person, they're involved at least to that percentage wise for that business. What is a socially or economically disadvantaged business? I'm glad you asked. So right here, you can just kind of read on that slide, basically areas that are more impacted historically, different types of ethnic groups, things like that. So. And then everyone's favorite slide, the Q&A. So at this time, I'd be more than happy to take any questions that folks have.
Thank you so much for that, Stephen. I do have one question since you're still sharing your screen. There is a note in addition to the restaurant portal on SBA, an integration with the point of sale system. Could you go into a little bit more detail about what that actually looks like?
Okay, let me just bring that up real quick here. Just so that we can all reference that information together. Yes, so some of these point of sale vendors, and you'll have to forgive me for 1 second. I was just reading that a second ago, and because there are some partnerships that have already been established with a couple of these businesses, and
I think I have it on the website here. It says Square, Toast, Clover,
yep.
NCR Corporation, which is Aloha, and Oracle. And so I will, let's see, it's in the how to apply section. I will put that into the chat. But the SBA website's really good about putting this on there. So for everyone on this call, please go there for details.
Yeah, and I also posted the link to the press release our office put out. This would have been on April 22nd, so just a couple weeks ago, where we did highlight those. And I do apologize. I mean, RRF has been going left and right, up, down. But yeah, so to your point, Square, Toast, Clover, to your point there. So some of these kind of more digitized lending platforms, especially for many of you who may be eligible, this may be using these types of point of sale setups in your own businesses for those digitized sales. So they've become partners with the program. So if you don't go through the traditional portal on the website, they are facilitating that as well. And if you do use those services, I'd be very surprised if you've not already received email communication from them as you are one of their clients. Much like if you were a client of Chase and them informing you about the Paycheck Protection Program.
And we had a earlier submitted question. I think we've addressed some of them about the average award amount. That obviously is going to vary based on your circumstances. But do we have an expectation of turnaround time? I know, so hopefully this is going a little bit slower of a clip than say the frenzy that was with PPP, but it sounds like there's a little bit more of a system in place this go around because it hasn't been so immediate in the rush to get the funding out.
Well, lessons have certainly been learned since the EIDL advance kerfuffles that happened essentially this time last year. Yeah, so this portal is the contractor who set up the portal is now we actually have lead time on it versus COVID just hitting instantly. So That process, from what I understand, because one of our lending relations specialist folks in our Denver office is in that cell that I had kind of identified of folks being able to help, and they're looking at right now about a 2 to 3 day turnaround time of you applying, being vetted, and then at least being approved. Now, disbursement of funds, I don't know if that's happening within that 72-hour turnaround time, but I'm going to go back and get some more information on how that's looking. And for many of you that probably saw Chris's email, I was on leave yesterday for my birthday, so I have like 30 emails that decided to come in on my birthday. So let me get some more information on that, and then Chris, I'll get that to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And then, there was a question about the potential for funds running out, kind of similar lesson learned from PPP of it was a first come, first serve of how quickly you could apply. It looks like we had that pilot phase and sort of the priority phasing. And then once we get to day 22, which be around, depends on how the SBA counts it, around May 25th. What do you see in terms of how funding is being dispersed, the order in which it has it with those applications, and then any future potential once the original fund is exhausted?
Yeah, so Chris makes a very good point. I fully expect this program to go very, very fast. For those that are not aware, today SBA identified that we have now exhausted all our PPP funds. So the additional funds that were reloaded through phase 2 and phase 3 have now been fully extinguished, and we do not know if there will be a further congressional reauthorization to that. So with that said, you now know that one of our prime COVID relief programs is now out of funds, and there are still funds through the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, but that's a very, very specific kind of sliver of businesses that can tap into that. So if you are eligible for RRF and this is something that interests you, be ready to go on day 1. In the slides, you'll see the different documentation that you'll need, and let me clarify one thing. You can apply right now. You can go either through the point of sale systems if you use those, or you could go through our website. Go ahead and apply. It doesn't mean you'll be eligible yet if you're not within that priority group window, but this gives you the time to get your documents together and then ask questions through the customer service portal if you have them. And so, yeah, if you're eligible and you think you want it, do not drag your feet on applying.
I appreciate that reminder.
Yeah, and we
get
have
ducks in a row.
Yeah, well, we have, and to your other question, Chris, we have no indication if the program will be increased with funds or not. So it would take an additional congressional reauthorization to do that.
Literally an act of Congress. So.
Literally.
So Stephanie has a question. Are these applications evaluated by individuals, especially 3 and 4, or is the rest automated?
It first goes through an automated process, and then it goes to our cell for kind of that 2-point review process.
Okay, so part technology, part human evaluation.
Yeah, and so some of the technology aspect of, did you upload the documents you have? Did you put your social security number or your EIN number into the application? So little stuff like that. It's going to kick it back through the automated process saying, we need you still need this information for your application and things like that. But once all that's fully completed, then it goes to this group that reviews them as they come in.
Now, for further clarification, this is an SBA program. Is everything handled directly through the SBA? Because I know we've had other programs where we had local bankers involved, or is this say like 1-for-1, you with the government?
This is fully SBA. Yeah. So unlike PPP, which was constructed for the lenders to be the central point of contact, we train the lenders on PPP because it is a grant program that the government is facilitating. It's all through SBA.
We have a question. Is eligibility based upon demonstrable losses over the 2020 calendar year? We talked about 2019 receipts.
We did. So I am going to bring this one particular slide up. It's just kind of scenarios Okay, it's nice to have dual screens. So this would be an example, and remember, everyone's calculations are going to be slightly different, but they did want to throw a couple examples, and again, these will be in the slides provided to you. But if you have a business that started, and I'm sorry for the individual asking the question, did your business start in 2020?
No, I know this business owner, they started prior to 2020.
Okay, based on okay, so for your situation, you're gonna be going back. Let's just bring up this scenario here. So you would more likely be this scenario here. So you are essentially going to take those 2019 gross receipts minus the 2020 gross receipts. So if you did have especially significant losses in 2020, and of course minus the PPP loan amount, that's generally going to be the formula, the math you're going to need to use to calculate that. So obviously, obviously no one wants to see losses, but if you did have significant losses year over year from 19 to 20, then one would believe that your RRF amount should be significantly higher eligibility. So
in terms of allocation of the funds, is this, essentially in competition for grant funding across the US, or are there certain amounts allocated to, say, state of Colorado gets X? I know we had a disproportionately higher amount of PPP awarded to the state of Colorado over the whole multiple fundings of it. But is there any allocation, or is it, again, really just emphasizing that get your paperwork ready, apply, get in the system so that you make sure you actually get access to this fund?
That's a good question. It is first come, first serve. So once every penny of this fund has been drained, it's gone.
Thank you for that clarification. If we have any other questions, we have another one. Okay, this was a question about the turnaround time. So question is the turnaround time about 3 or 4 days, 2 to 3 days for approval, but we're not too sure on when those funds will actually be dispersed. I think there's concern about a backlog happening. There had been some delays with some of the other SBA programs. So again, I think there's been a lot of lessons learned in the last year, but I'll let you elaborate in terms of what you see for the disbursements. And if this is a to be verified, I can always come back and post the answer on our website.
Yeah, so Stephanie, to your question, personally, I am concerned that we may run into another EIDL situation where there does become a backlog. I mean, the pipe is only so big, and if this is what you're getting into the pipe, everything will get rack and stacked based on the date that the applications are made. So that's another reason why I want to emphasize that if you think you're eligible, go ahead and apply and get all your documents ready to go, because I don't want you being on the back end of that backlog where, hey, I applied and I did everything right, but because a potential backlog did happen and the funds ran out, you end up getting negatively impacted. Do I hope that won't happen? I do, but there's only so many people who's working this program, and there's going to be, I mean, we're literally talking about the industry that was hit hardest by COVID. So it would, especially now that the PPP funds have been exhausted, these are the type of entities where, hey, it's a grant program, I don't have to pay back. Of course, we're more than likely going to get a ton of requests, and very, very early on. So I know, like I said, right now, it's been about a 3-day turnaround time for the approval part, but I am going to go back and I'm going to ask that question to my lender guys about what is the time frame for disbursement thus far. And now remember, we're still in that special category. So once that full window opens up on day 22, it's going to be I would assume it will be a deluge of requests.
Stephanie, I hope that answers your questions. Let's see if there's any other questions. We're happy to take them. To quickly sum up everything that I heard, because I kind of breezed over the SBA's website. Again, lots of great resources available there. And thank you, Stephen, for elaborating. And I will provide your contact information as kind of with the recording that comes with this. But really, top level is get everything ready to go, get into the portal, and really, time is of the essence. So really make this a priority so that you get access to the funding that's there, because we have no idea if it might be further funded in the future. So please take advantage of this program. It's, again, anything from 1,000 all the way up to 5 million. That is a very large
Man,
range of what you're eligible for, but that is also a lot of money for our businesses who have been, as you said, hit the hardest. So we really do hope you take advantage of this program, and leverage those resources that we've made available to you. And thank you again, Stephen, for really going down and breaking this down in kind of plain English, and taking, you try to read those congressional bills and it makes no sense. So this is,
well,
thank you for the plain English.
and honestly, even with bills that pass, I mean, the agencies come up with additional operating instructions and guidance to apply to how the law is executed. So sometimes even, you read the legislation, but that's not how it's going to be fulfilled sometimes. So and that's why, it's like a mad scramble once legislation's passed to get all that clarified. Then the lawyers get to earn their paycheck by reviewing everything. And then, of course, we then get it out to the business communities from there. So,
And I think, as you mentioned, the extra clarification with those spending, resources, that documentation part is important. And then 2023 does seem like a ways off. So that's a lot of keep those receipts, make sure you track everything and how this money is spent in case you have to, when that audit potential comes through. It looks like we had a couple of questions regarding the CARES Act and ERTC. I know there's, again, we've had a plethora of stuff that comes down from Congress in terms of, both the tax code as well as different programming that's available. From my understanding, a lot of the CARES Act was more government focused, versus private business. But again, there were so many programs available. I don't know if there's a specific question about that, Stephanie, that you'd like to elaborate further on.
and and before we go any further, I know, and I'll be completely honest, I know very little about ERTC because it's more of an IRS program than SBA. So I would probably have to defer you to my IRS counterparts, and I have a gentleman who I can connect you with on those questions.
I think that would be best. I think, yeah, the focus of this webinar is the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. It is an SBA program. A lot of the tax credits and other things that were in different government or the Congress funded incentives or tax rebates, all of that, I would, that is something that the IRS is usually being very good about documenting, as well as organizations like Employers Council and other HR and tax related organizations. So I would defer to them on that. But this presentation is specific to the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And I'll let Steven stay in his wheelhouse of SBA programs.
Well, yes, and I know this is being recorded, but my job is to help small businesses in any which way they can, and if that's just simply connecting them with resources, I'll do that as well. And Chris, I will provide you in a follow-up email the contact information for a gentleman named Joe Garcia with the IRS, and then maybe perhaps we can get Stephanie connected with him. He's part of the taxpayer advocate program for the IRS, which is a little known program, and Joe loves it when I get the word out about his office. So, yeah, I'd be more than happy to get you connected.
And I think given, we've seen a lot of tax professionals go through this, and we've had the tax extension this year because so much has changed in the tax code, that I think that's an opportunity for another educational webinar with the federal government, switching from SBA to IRS. I think that's a huge opportunity between that, as well as everything that's happened in the state of Colorado with regards to those types of programs. So I would just leave it as stay tuned. Stephen will make that connection and hopefully continue to educate our members and other small business owners about what is available, and making sure that everyone's taking advantage of all these different resources that have been made available to us during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for everyone's time. Special thanks to you, Stephen. This has been incredibly informative and really easy to understand, which is, I think, the goal for both of us. And if you understand the emphasis, please go and apply and get ready to go for that funding. So best of luck to everyone. And if you have questions, I will be sharing Stephen's contact information so you can get that additional assistance. But thank you for being a friendlier side of government and making things easier for our small businesses. And with that, thank you for your time and have a great day.